Welcome to the What Drives You podcast. I'm Kevin Miller. I produce this show to help us all continually discover where we want to go, why, and how to best get there, all the while enjoying the drive as much as the destinations we want to reach. In this episode, your job is a marriage and how to uplevel your relationship together. We are all going to work for most of our lives. We applaud people for their anniversaries. Oh, you've been married for 10 years. Congrats. Or the big celebration you have for a couple who's been married for 50 years. Well, most of us will work for nearly 50 years, married to our work. I actually had my first consistent job at 13 years old. Started my first business when I was 15. My intent's to live till 90 if I am able to. And if I do, I'll be working until then. That'd put me at about 75 years of working. But you'll also spend more time with your work during those years than your spouse if you don't include sleeping. So in essence, the greatest marriage of your life is going to be your work. I've never thought about it that way till now. So then we think, what kind of relationship will you have with this primary spouse? So my guest is Dr. Tessa West. She is a professor of psychology at New York University, where she's a leading expert on the science of social relationships. She's got over 100 academic publications. She's a regular contributor to the Wall Street Journal. Her work's been covered by Scientific America, the New York Times, Financial Times, The Guardian, CNN, CNBC, ABC World News, Time, Bloomberg, Fast Company, the U.S. Supreme Court even. Well, her first book was Jerks at Work, and now she's published a book titled Job Therapy, Finding Work That Works for You. In the book is where she posits the comparison between our work and a primary personal relationship like a marriage. I really honed in on the aspect of marriage. She says that at the core, we have these deep, intimate feelings about our work, and it's a primary ingredient in our overall self-image, our identity, and our overall drive for a life. So that's where I dug in with Tessa. With all the focus on the topic of work that I've had, I've never really gone down this trail of looking to our feelings and our emotions and our core relationship with it and how we really view it. So this conversation will forever change how I view my relationship with work. I think you'll find great value as well. You can find Tessa at tessawestauthor.com. As you hear this and you've got questions, ideas, thoughts for me or for Tessa, let me know. Email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. What drives you becomes the journey of your life. Let's help you enjoy this ride better right now. So drive with me a moment to consider your job as a marriage and how to uplevel your relationship together. Tessa, my first interest when I saw you come across here and you're professor of psychology at NYU, and I thought, what is it that out of all the things that you can focus on that really brought you, what's a story that brought you into work specifically? I mean, interpersonal communications makes sense, but that you really veered into the workplace. I just didn't find that as far as a background and want to know what made you go, oh, that's where I'm going.
I've had a lot of really weird jobs over the years.
Fair enough.
I started, I've been working since I was 14 at a video store. I sold men's shoes at Nordstrom's for many years. And I think most of the stuff that's actually interested me as a researcher, things like status, interpersonal dynamics, jockeying for power, conflict aversion, all of these kinds of complex concepts, I really developed in the workplace myself. Starting when I was 14, 15 years old. And I think I had this kind of interesting trajectory of being raised very blue collar, working from a young age, having all kinds of weird dynamics at work, and then going to college and then going to grad school and then coming back to that stuff and going, that's where all the juicy stuff happens. I actually kind of miss studying how people try to fight for shoe sales with each other and what it looks like when you're feeling insecure at work and how do you give feedback to someone who needs it, but you don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable. So I kind of just returned to kind of my original love of, awkward interactions in the workplace once I got tenure, and then I got to kind of explore all kinds of new horizons outside of the lab.
I When your book came across my desk, and you know my dad, I mean, I've been involved in work you love and that pursuit. What a gift! I've never known anything else, and it's such a gift. But when your book came across, really looking at the psychology of it and relating it to relationships, and in my mind, I just went to marriage right away. I thought,
Yeah,
oh, I want to talk about that, um, and I do. I also, though, have been, I'm going to say, frustrated for a while. And maybe I think it's kind of come to light as I've had older kids going into the workplace, and we've gotten to talk about it. And I got to share my angst of, you get a job or go looking for a job and you get something, you look at the commute, where it is, what's the company, what's the pay, what kind of office you're going to have, blah, blah, kind of those things. And yet 90 days down the road, that stuff can be completely worthless to
yeah,
you if you hate who you're working with, if you don't like the office vibe, all these little things that we don't think to ask. And I just haven't seen it talked about a whole lot. And you literally get into it relationally, talking about generally the malaise that you hear from people is not some huge thing, just like a marriage. It's not that
yeah.
there was physical abuse or there was an affair or there was whatever. It's just a whole bunch of little things. And then we find, like one of the chapters in your book, we just drifted apart or whatever. And again, that's why you're here. I love your take on this. I'm eager to dig in.
Yeah, I think most of us don't think about our jobs as relationship partners that we have complex emotional relationships with. We love it, we hate it, we fall out of love with it. It falls out of love with us, yet we're still trying to make it work. And I think people are sometimes ashamed of the emotions that they feel at work, or they feel like maybe they ought to not feel these things because it's just a job, that they have real life relationships that matter, and that this is just a means to an end. But I actually think that for most of us, we spend most of our time at work, and this is a real relationship. And often, we get really far into our relationship with our crew and we realize we don't even like this relationship anymore, but we feel trapped, like having a mortgage and four dogs and three kids, and we don't see our way out, but we don't know how to talk about it in that way because we're so focused on compensation and work from home policies and all of that structural stuff you alluded to. So I want to get people comfortable with the sort of nitty gritty of the complex emotional relationship you have with your career.
We're going to come to specifics that I've been studying in your book. But for a moment, Tessa, it's so interesting that, even you saying that, I mean, we just don't count the cost well of any relationship, whether it is our work, whether it is our, a romantic relationship, kids. I'm irritated at that one. I have 9 kids. I've been through the ringer here, and I look at people these days and I think they have a kid like getting a little puppy. And then, down the road, I think they despise their kid just like they despise the dog. They're screaming at the dog to get in line, and it's jerking them off the bike path, and they're yelling and screaming at it. The kid, I was just in I was just a week away out in a little mountain town, and I was out in public more than I am. I didn't see a lot of people. I saw some, but not a lot of them enjoying their kids. And I'm thinking, did they think about what this is really like? I mean, having a kid's going into a business. So coming in here, we don't count the cost. And as you said, work, we probably spend more time at that than anything else. It may be the greatest. I'm going to keep using the word marriage. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think of it
Okay.
as a marriage too.
I do too. And you've got me thinking about that. So if we looked at that, I mean, just that alone, if we just stop that and we just put the headline, and I'm going to put Tessa West, think about your job like a marriage. Boom, stop right there. That should, if people took the weight of that, especially if they've been married, that's a gigantic paradigm and a needed paradigm shift. Fair?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think what I like about thinking about it as a marriage is when there's red flags that things are wrong in a romantic relationship, we have some intuition of what to look for. So
Hmm.
when you're falling out of love, for instance, one of the first things that happen when you're married to someone and you're falling out of love isn't that you disengage, you quietly quit the marriage. It's you go all in. It's like every last ditch effort to try to prove to yourself that you can make this work, especially if you're not on board with divorce. You go on a lot of date nights in that kind of terrible stage right before divorce. I've been divorced, so I went through this. And we do that at work too, but we're not trained to think about falling out of love with a career to look like that. We're trained to think of it as slow disengagement. And people in HR will measure disengagement to look for red flags of who's at risk, who's a flight risk. But really, the signs are who's actually showing up early and staying late and going all in to prove that they've done everything they can to make this relationship work before they're ready to leave. And so it's like often the opposite of what we've been trained to look for
Yeah.
when we see those early red flags that someone's falling out of love with their job. But they're the same things that we see when you fall out of love with another person that you've committed to, that you put your whole life into, lots of money, and you have shared children and dogs and all of those things. So
Yeah.
I think it can help us see some red flags too.
I'm interested in, maybe you're already doing this, but as I have a sea of independent contractors for the most part. I don't employ a lot of people, but thinking about that, if I'm an employer with 5 or 50 or 500 employees, wouldn't it, I like the word flight risk. You just use that to bring you in, or bring this concept in and say, how can we as a company go audit our folks and see what's eaten at them that is going to manifest into them? Either we're going to lose them and have to replace them, or they're just going to be sitting there doing kind of a mediocre job because they're pissed off.
Yeah, I think one thing we're not trained to look for is these kinds of two concepts of you're highly identified with your job, but you hate it at the same time. And we see this with romantic relationships all the time. I'm a married person, I'm a family man, yet I'm
Yeah.
totally miserable. And so you can be high on what I call in my book identity centrality. This relationship defines you. When it's going well, you're feeling good about yourself. When it's going poorly, you feel like terrible about yourself. But you're low on identity satisfaction. So it's like you're addicted to this thing that brings you no joy. And that's a real danger zone to be in that no one's really trained to look for. And I think there are ways that you can kind of suss out whether the people in your company are doing this, especially in jobs like healthcare or, in law firms where people have climbed to the top, where there's a huge sunk cost for leaving. And they assume that that's going to keep them stuck to the job like a spider web. And it's called embeddedness. And we sort of rely on that to keep people in jobs that they hate.
Yeah.
But then you get all these kinds of messy emotional consequences and stress contagion and all that kind of stuff that we know that we can spot in romantic relationships. So I do think there is utility of kind of being a little more nuanced and thinking about those red flags.
Tessa, that aspect right there of emotions, that's what it feels like. That's just a continual thread of overlap here on the show, is coming to emotions and being aware of how we feel, which has been, again, I'll be the chiefest of sinners, as far as my life. That's been an area of high performance, high achievement, very low emotional intelligence. And so now we're saying, to understand, to really conceive of your book, I've got to have some understanding of my own, like, how am I really feeling about this? How am I really feeling? Okay. Is this, the word I like to look at today is this really sustainable, or can I, is this going to work, or is this going to manifest somewhere? I've got to get honest. It feels like a call out to time to get honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you got to dig deep to see why you're actually really unhappy. And one thing that we're seeing a huge trend around is people are miserable. And so they leave, and then they just hop into the next thing, and then they leave again. And it's a little like hopping from one relationship to the next without really figuring out what is it about this that is actually making me unhappy. And often the answer is something simple, like you don't have a handle on what your daily stressors are. You don't know what is taking up that kind of blood pressure box every day. And I encourage people to kind of measure themselves in a systematic way, because often we don't, and we assume we know what upsets us, what stresses us out, what's holding us back. But we actually don't, because we're just using kind of our memory of what we think ought to have bothered us, not actually collecting data on ourselves. And I think that's a huge piece of answering this puzzle.
Okay, well, I'll pull that out because you have that in your book. You have a daily stress test, and I really appreciate it. I'm looking at my notes here, and you have people document, what do you think is going to stress you out today? Oh, that's great. So get up in the morning, go, okay, you're going into work. What do you think is going to stress you out today? And write that down. Now, at the end of the day, day's over, say what actually stressed you out and how often there's a huge discrepancy. I thought that was brilliant, just in regards to your, whether it's work or just your day in general. Today, what's going to stress you out? Whether, regards to your work, your marriage, your kids, your whatever it is, and then say what actually did. I actually need to do that exercise. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, people, what's fascinating is often what actually stresses us out are things that we're used to, but we don't encode them as stressors. And my metaphor is like, imagine you have the same fight with your wife every night about finances. You're so used to having this fight about how you're going to pay the bills that you don't realize that that's actually stressing you out until someone asks you, what was the most stressful part of your day? And then you can say, oh, it was that fight. But until you're self-reflecting on that, you just get used to it as business as usual. This is our just nightly routine, is to have this fight. It's my nightly routine to have a fight with my boss, or to get something on my schedule that I didn't plan. So I think often it just takes some self-reflection to realize, oh, wow, that thing actually is stressing me out. Even if I'm used to it, I've just sort of forgotten what it's doing to my physiologic stress response in my body.
Tessa, there's some of that I still was unaware of. It wasn't until I'm holding up my watch, a wearable device, and started tracking it. And I wanted to think that everything had to do with what I ate or my exercise that day or whatever. And then it wasn't lining up. And I started looking at what were the stresses today? What was happening with my work? What was happening with the discussion with my wife or whatnot? And looking at that and going, holy crap, realizing that those conversations I thought I was enduring well, I wasn't. And it was showing up in my sleep patterns, in my recovery and whatnot. And it took a lot of, for me, it took a device to tell me what I didn't know. But again, the point coming back to, we're not aware of what's stressing us. So back to that audit of understanding. I mean, from a high level, coming into your message brought me back again to how often are we working for the paycheck? And I just hadn't thought about it in relation to marriage until your book here. And I'm reading it and going, how often do we say, hey, what do you work for? Money. How do you feel about your job otherwise? That's the only reason I'm doing it. So you wouldn't show up if you weren't getting a paycheck? No, not at all. Would you do that in your marriage? Why are you married? Oh, it's just for the sex. Purely that. I hate her otherwise. It's only for the sex, or it's just, he's a great cook. But do you like him otherwise? No, I totally loathe him, man. But his food is amazing. It's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
How often though are we doing that still at this day and age in our work? Fair?
Yeah, fair. And I would say to the sex food person, it's like, okay, that sounds great, but you spend more time at work than you do in that marriage. So maybe you should even take it more seriously that you're only working for the paycheck, or you're only working for, some retirement package in some foreseeable future. I think people are totally irrational when they make structural workplace decisions. And they don't think about their long-term relationship with their career. They think about it as like a dating relationship where they can just break up with this job and start a new one. I'm like, no, you're bringing your baggage with you. It's sort of the old joke of like, you can go on a vacation with your spouse, but you're going to bring all that misery to that hotel room, and you're going to bring all that stuff with you to the next relationship, and I think it's just, people are not thinking about this way at all. In fact, they get very reactionary when you tell them to. They're like, but this is just a job. There's no emotions involved. I'm like, of course there's emotions involved. You lose sleep over your job all the time. I mean, there's direct physiologic outcomes. There's erectile dysfunction is correlated with misery at work. There's studies on this. Yes, it's like direct correlation. It's not mediated through your spousal conflict. It's just direct, which just shows you what the stress can do to your body. So I think take it seriously, and then you can think kind of differently about things.
I mean, your first chapter is on, crisis of identity. And that's probably where I really honed in looking at this, and in all my roles. I mean, I've been able to, question my role as a husband, as a father. I mean, that's one that's changed. I've got older kids. I just told you, I've got two boys this week alone moving out of the house, and my role has changed. And for me to look at that and realize some of my errant identity attachments that I had as a father and how I'm redefining that. And it's been significant. It is significant to me in looking at my identity and what I had attached there. And so let's go to work. Again, this place where most of us are going to spend, maybe it's not more important. You're one of those people who says, no, family is more important. That's great. But where do you spend most of your time? And it's at work. And to really question, what is our identity with our work? And I think my first interest to what you said just a second ago is it's got to be just dangerous to try to separate it. And I appreciate saying I am not just what I do. So I am not just a podcaster. That would be that feels shameful. I'm not just a podcaster. But in what I do, is my identity part of what I do? Absolutely. But how can we do that? I don't know. Speak to that as far as a healthy identity. It's not all of me, but of course it's part of what I do. It's what I look at it as it's what I'm deciding to contribute to the world outside of, yes, I do it to make some income, but if I didn't need the income, this is still what I want to matter to somebody.
Yeah. I think there's a real danger in not being honest with yourself about the level of identity. And I think some people say to me, is it dangerous to be too identified or not identified enough? And my answer is there's no right way to do it, but there's two things you need to think about. One, does the career you want to pursue or you have match the identity that you feel? If you feel like you're not super identified with a job, but the job wants that out of you, then there's an identity mismatch. You're working in a place that's asking more of you than you're willing to give. And the people I talk to who fall into this feel like they work for a cult. They're like, it's culty and creepy here. Everyone sort of over-identifies with this company or it's everything to them. And I just don't feel that pull. And so that mismatch can be uncomfortable. Or you're over-identified with something that doesn't love you as much as you love it. And then you have an unrequited relationship with your career. So those can be dangerous kind of mismatches. You want alignment between how much you want to be identified with the career and how much that career sort of is asking back from you. I also think you need to be super realistic about how identified you are as you approach retirement. One of the biggest reasons why people suffer from depression at retirement is because they fall off the cliff once they leave. And it makes, they have nothing to fill that hole. You see this with career transitioners too. They leave and then there's just like a black hole inside of them of what is that career identity? I didn't replace it before I left this thing. And then they go into a deep, dark depression and they beg for their old jobs back. And so you need to be realistic about what holes you need to fill before you leave something, whether that be for a new career or for retirement. You know, in addition to thinking about that identity matching, which I think is really, really critical for people.
I mean, Tessa, at that point, I feel like we're coming back to what do I do? What do I offer overall, regardless of this job? If I'm going to go into this job or this job or this job, I mean, ultimately, if it was me, if it was Kevin, you got to go get a job in the regular, workplace, which I've never really had. But if I had to do that, I mean, I kind of know what I have to offer. It would be in sales or communication or for the most part. And I could do that in a lot of places. And that's what I would do. And it's interesting. We had that retirement talk yesterday because we just posted a show with it was a past show with my dad about retirement. And I have no concept of that. I don't want to retire. I'm doing things that I just want to continue doing. And that doesn't have to be the case, for everyone necessarily, but to still know your identity. What do you offer through yourself overall and have a connection to that's beyond just that one job feels vital for today and retirement. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people can think really creatively about what a future job would look like as they're offboarding into retirement or as they transition into a career. So I think a lot of us think of our identity as the tasks we do. I'm a professor and my identity is a researcher. That's not actually my identity. My identity is more, I'm a creative thinker who values freedom and autonomy in what I do. And no matter what I pursue, whether that's in academia or as a trade book author, or if I was to ever leave and be a consultant, I would need that piece of my identity to be maintained. The autonomy and the creative thinker piece, the ability to sort of like grow and explore. If I just had to, make widgets all day, then I feel like my soul would die. So it's not so much the tasks I do, the role that I play, or my job title. It's those core psychological needs that have to be met that define my identity. And that's where the real work is for people. What are those things that get you excited to get up in the morning? What are those core psychological drives that really define why the work you do makes you feel good or bad? That's what you should be chasing, not the roles, not the titles, not the compensation, and not the tasks, because those things can move around throughout our careers. But autonomy and creativity, that is a deal breaker for me. You take those things away from me and I'll feel depressed. And I know that about myself because I've had a million jobs where I didn't get those things. And I got a lot of jobs that on the surface had nothing in common with each other, but that's what they had in common. And that's how I knew sort of what to chase in my.
Okay, high five first off on that. You just brought up something that transcends even what you're doing. That yeah, at the end of the day, no matter what I'm doing, I've got to be exactly what you said. I have to have autonomy and the ability to be creative. And I did have one real job about 30 years ago for 2 years. I was in the mortgage and real estate industry. And I had that there. That was the one thing that primarily fit. I had autonomy. And that today, Tessa, I'm 53 years old. When I wake up in the morning, probably the greatest thrill before what I'm doing is that I get to wake up, get my cup of coffee, and decide whatever the heck I'm going to do today. I get to do that. Do I feel creative? Do I just want to screw around? Do I want to do this? Just that alone is worth its weight in gold. I have a son, one of my kiddos, who's literally the opposite. And we grew him up, doing entrepreneurial stuff at farmers market and doing all. He understands that, and he says, "I want a job where it's very laid out for me what I'm going to do, and I'm going to walk in. I'm not like you, Dad." I go, "Man, that is great. We need people like you." So no right, wrong, good, bad, but just knowing yourself. I'm so glad that he, at such a young age, knows himself. That's just powerful, Tessa, because that transcends whatever the heck you're going to do.
Yeah. So he wants predictability.
Yep.
He wants to know if I do X, Y will happen. And you and I are comfortable with a lack of predictability. We're comfortable with there's a million ways this could go wrong, but I'm willing to take that risk because I value my autonomy so much. My son is the same way, actually. What he wants is power. He's a little power-hungry 11-year-old. And it's like, he doesn't care what she does as long as it involves status climbing, which sounds super cringy, but I'm like, okay, so you need a job that involves a ladder. You don't want a flat hierarchy of work. You don't want a flat structure. And he's okay with people above him telling him what to do. He likes hierarchy. And that's just his thing that he's going to be kind of striving for, I think, his whole life.
So funny. Tessa, I have a 13-year, no, he's 14 now. 14. We had a discussion last night at the table, and he made a comment about, just wanting to be rich. And I said something to him. I said, "Dude, that's okay." He says, "No, I'm serious. I just, I'm going to do something that I enjoy, but I want to make bank." Okay, man. Cause I've never been somebody who's put a big value on that. I got a big family and I make enough to take care of them and then spend time with them. And that's kind of been the focus. And he's going, "That's cool, but I don't know if I'm going to have kids and I want to make bank." That's good to know. And yeah, like power, whatever. It's again, what is that thing the show's called What Drives You? We're talking about what do we've got to know what it is at the core, but you're separating that out. I mean, what would be some of those top levels, Tessa, in the job, the thing that drives you? I mean, of course, we want to make revenue. We know appreciation is usually high for some people, but like that, knowing that you need the space to be creative or you want predictability. What are some of the things that bubble to the top?
Status and respect. So people often have a real drive to get respect and admiration from others. I study status, and that is something that people like to deny is mattering, but actually really, really matters a lot. Predictability. People care a ton about, whether they can predict what will happen tomorrow or not. I think, and also just low level stress. So I was talking to my husband about how some people are fine. They don't need to be managers. They don't want to hear any more podcasts about how you can climb up at work. They want to hear podcasts telling them that it's okay to be right in the middle and that what they value is balance. What they value is keeping their blood pressure down. For some people, their number one concern is that unanticipated stressors aren't dropped into their lap at work. And if that means that they're always making the same amount and they only get an inflation raise, that's fine with them. If it means that they get demoted at work and a younger person takes their job who's a go-getter, they're also okay with that. What they care about is keeping their blood pressure down. I have a friend who had a heart attack at the age of 35, and all he cares about is keeping his blood pressure down so he doesn't have another one. He doesn't care about productivity. He doesn't care about being the best. He's in academia, and he never wants to run the department or be dean or publish a million papers. He just wants to keep his heart rate down. And so I think for some people, low level of stress is another driver. You and I are probably okay with a little bit of stress. In fact, I harness stress. I get bored when I don't get stressed. So I think boredom is something that people strive for as well. They just want to be bored and predictable at work. So I think just being honest with yourself about what your drive is, even if it's not a popular one. It's okay to have a drive that other people think is gross or boring or not their lane. That's okay, but you have to be honest with yourself about what yours are, so you're not chasing something that's popular right now, or you're not following all those trends on LinkedIn that's telling you what you ought to be doing to get ahead, because deep down, you don't want to get ahead. That's okay. So, I think we're all strivers right now, and it's okay to not be one of those people too.
I mean, you've got me thinking of again, to come back to the money aspect, to go, okay, outside of money. I don't think anybody's going to say that they're in a job and they don't care about the money. So outside of that, what are the things? What are the 5 things aside from money that you want? And I imagine people would put down some of those things that they want. Yeah, they want autonomy or they want predictability or whatever. Okay, do that. But I think let's start right there. Do you find a lot of people are just pretty unclear?
Yeah, they don't know. They have no idea. I actually asked this question at a really low level. I think, if you write down what makes you happy at work, let's not think big picture about these psychological constructs. Let's think low level. Do you want a coffee shop that's within walking distance? Do you want a short commute? Do you want an office that is quiet? Do you want an open concept office? Creature comforts. I actually lead with those questions. I have a lot of colleagues who chase after Ivy League jobs. They want to work for Harvard or Princeton or Stanford. When they're there, I'm like, are you happy? You're finally at Harvard. They go, no, because the coffee shop is 14 minutes away. My office is always hot and no one's around. Those aren't Harvard problems. Those are everyday low-level work problems. So stop chasing these big things and think about your low-level day-to-day creature comforts and what actually makes you happy at work. My colleagues who are deans, they like the power, but they hate being in a building that's far away from everyone. It's a little bit lonely and kind of smells old. And that's all they talk about is my AC still broken. They still haven't fixed my AC. Doesn't matter if you're dean if it's hot.
Yeah.
Low level. Think about your day-to-day creature comforts. And I'd also say, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, but we're talking about marriage. The number one predictor of getting into an on-again, off-again relationship with someone in the romantic context is that you underestimate comfort. You underestimate how comfortable that crappy relationship is, because you get to wear your pajamas all day and you get to watch Netflix and you don't have to impress the person and it's comfortable. And that's the same thing that gets pulled us into jobs that we don't think we like, because we underestimate these creature comforts and how important they are for our actual happiness. So going from that high level to that low level, don't think too lofty about it. Think about the coffee shop and the lunch and the office and the temperature and your commute and those things too.
All right. I'm laughing because I'm sitting here making my list. I've never really thought about it because, again, I own my work. So I'm at my office now. Well, that's relevant. So I do have an office because sometimes my house is just there's too much going on. I get distracted. So I've got an office in town. But even there, I'm thinking I got to have a window. I've got 2. I'm in a corner office. So I got 2. I got to have a window. It's got to be fairly quiet. I got to be able to play music. That's a must. I got to have a place to make food. Informal dress is a have to for sure. I've got to have a shower because I generally am going to head out at some point and I'm going to get sweaty. And so it's interesting. Those are the types of things that I have crafted for myself. But to think if I was going to work someplace and be comfortable, the things that would finally after a couple months, it just isn't going to work. It would be things like that. But that's never, how often is that part of somebody's job description? Or even the think without to question it. You're just happy to get the job, make the money.
Get the job, make the money, and
have status.
Have status. If you're going to work in an office, you have to insist on interviewing in person. You need to see what that office is like. And I think I talk about playing anthropologist at work. You need to see, are people around? Are they in the kitchen? Do they take their lunches at their desk? Are they hot desking? Working in real estate, I had a lot of relatives in real estate. The first thing that I would always do when I was house shopping was I would go to the bathrooms at the houses and I would turn on the shower, because no one talks about water pressure.
Interesting.
Real estate, and I hate a weak shower. That would like be a deal breaker for me. In the same way that I hate a loud office, or I hate, an office that doesn't have its own temperature control. I wouldn't buy a house where I couldn't sample a shower, and I wouldn't take a job where I couldn't see where I would be sitting for 8 hours a day. And I think we often are thinking about what's the compensation package? Let me do a Zoom interview. It's more convenient than going in person. And then we show up and it's like we bought a house with a crappy shower and now we're like stuck.
Yeah.
Nothing we can do except for have a weak shower for the next 20 years. And we don't think about those things, but they irritate you and they put you in a bad mood, right? If you couldn't get all those little things, checked off your list in your office, you would go crazy.
Oh, it's so smart, Tessa. So I'm in Colorado. I am so blessed to have so many friends who have so many homes all around the state. So I'm constantly going to a new town and staying for a few days, and I'll go to Wright and I'll stay for 3 days or 5 days in different cabins. And being there for a little while and in different seasons, I know the places that I would actually stay there. And I've got some towns that I'm kind of itching to think about having a place in that I know because I've spent time, but it took that. And other places where I never would have guessed, but oh my gosh, I realized that, XYZ, that, oh my God, the heater's so darn loud in this house. It's beautiful, but that's a killer for me. I'd have to change that or whatever. Or this town has, we were camping recently with some kids and realized we were in a flight pattern for, some airplanes way far away, but it was still just not what we're not doing that one again. And my thought to my gosh, if I was going to work someplace, I don't care where it is, it'd be the thought to let me come in and whether it was, intern or just let me hang out for a few days.
Yeah.
I'll sit out on the couch and I just want to see what's going on and see what happens over the course of a couple of days and the people and coming and going and feel the vibe of doing that. And it seems like if I was an employer, I would want people to do that too. Let's make sure this is a fit before you get in there and find something that's going to be a deal breaker or to see if we can alter it or not. As we talk about that, it seems amazing that doesn't happen, that's not the norm. But of course it's not, or you wouldn't have written the book.
Yeah, people don't think about the low level stuff. They don't know what stresses them out. They think really big picture. And it's like, picking a romantic partner based on how much they say their income is on their, Match.com profile or whatever. Like, we know that there are some necessary but not sufficient conditions for dating. And we think that way about the workplace, but then we kind of stop there. And we get so desperate during the interview process, which should be much more like a date. Asking tough, uncomfortable questions. There should be friction during an interview because you're asking hard things. But you can't develop intimacy without friction. And this is true in your romantic life, and this is true in your work life as well. A frictionless conversation is small talk. We do that at work during interviews, and then we show up and we're like, crap, I didn't ask about the hidden curriculum. I didn't ask about sort of like things not advertised or who wrote the job ad or if my manager's seen it or what it looks like to fail here. Those kinds of uncomfortable questions that you really need the answers to because we're so busy trying to impress and just land the thing that we forget about fit.
Gosh, Tessa, I just thought of a friend of mine. She took a job. She'd been in a corporate job and she kind of a step down job, less pressure and whatnot. It was with a kind of a big church type scenario. And she was relating a few weeks later her joy in finding out some of the comfort things like, oh, this has been great to find that. But I'm thinking that's like Russian roulette. So we're taking it and hoping things kind of work out. And she's pleasantly surprised. What a gift. But how often it's the opposite way. And we're back to counting the cost. I feel like that's what I'm hearing a lot from you. We don't even think about what the costs are. We don't do it well enough in our relationships, much less in our work, which in some ways is, it's going to irritate some people, but it's almost a more committed relationship.
Yeah.
That's not fair. We spend more time there. It's at least as important. If we can at least put it with equality, it is a marriage.
It is a relationship that you can't leave just because you feel like it.
Okay.
You need that income. You need that money. So even if you want to divorce your job, we're often not able to do that because we have to pay our bills. And so I feel like you have even less autonomy to walk away if you're miserable. And if it's a bad market, there's not much out there. You can always technically be a single person in the world, but you can't be unemployed forever. So I feel like you're even kind of more tethered to this kind of relationship, than even a romantic relationship often. I mean, people are afraid of being alone, but you're not going to die if you're single for a couple months.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be able to pay rent if you're unemployed for that same amount of time. So, I do think it's an even more committed relationship from that perspective.
Well, gosh, and you got me thinking too, that if you are in a personal relationship that ends, you usually have time. You don't have to get another one right away. And yet when we're in that job that ends because of all these things, and then it does end, we get fired because of our irritation finally built up into our work, and we, got let go or whatnot, whatever reason, we got to get a job right away. We don't have time now to do all this great stuff we're talking about. So when would be the best time? Right now in the work that you're in, to look at how can you figure out, again, what's going to make it tick for you? What's going to drive you well in your work? Can you make shifts and accommodate that where you're not, where you are? If not, now's the time to go out, and as you have time, find that place and look through these options and take the time before you're in survival mode. Because I just see that happening so often. People are in a bad situation, they get let go or it ends for whatever reason, and boom, they just got to find something. You don't have time to do this. It's a luxury they don't have.
One thing I talk a lot about in this book, and I will wax poetic about this, is
please
networking. And that's a gross word. People hate it, but just setting up 15-minute chats with people just to find out what other jobs are like. And you don't have to commit yourself to anything. It's a little like exploring the dating scene while you're still with someone. This is all about just discovering what the day-to-day looks like in other jobs. It's not about, showing yourself off or even trying to get a new job yet. It's just about developing potential new identities that you might want to explore later, but you're not going in just with no data when you're going on the market after you've been laid off. You've had maybe 2 or 3 conversations a week with people about other jobs, about other companies. And, this is a networking strategy that I think a lot of people aren't doing actively while they're employed. They wait until they're unemployed, but it doesn't take long to reach out and have 2 of these a week, 15-minute conversations where you ask people the question, before I started this job, nobody told me that, fill in the blank. You're going to learn a ton of information about what other jobs are like. And you can kind of start dating new careers and dating new jobs while you're still in your relationship. And you don't even have to be an unhappy person to do this. I think we should all probably be doing this a little bit just to explore options. But it's something that I think we don't do. And imagine if you could interview every ex of the person that you're dating. I would do that. I would interview the friends and the family and the people of someone that I'm thinking of dating to see what they're like. We often don't get to do that, but we can do that with our careers, and we just don't. And I just think it's something that we should all be embracing a little bit more of.
It's funny, but it's relevant. Yeah. I mean, I'm married, so I've never been on a dating site and build out a personality or personal profile. But in work, you can do that. There's no law against that or no contract, I don't think. Maybe somebody has one of that. But yeah, the idea to go out there, and I like the word you said, date. You can even hook up with somebody else out there in the work scenario and test it out. And again, man, we stay so laser focused. It's so myopic of us. And well, that's the point of this, is the wake up call to look at that. And I want to pull out, Tessa, you had the 5 key drivers that make people think of leaving their jobs. And the first one, you said, it says feeling like their career is no longer an important part of who they are when it used to be. So one of my daughters wrote a poem recently and talked about being in, this was in a relational context, being in love with an expired version of someone else, or an expired version of the couple that, used to be. And I thought it's such a brilliant perspective. And that's the first thing I thought of when I read this from you. Are you in love with the giddiness, of the job when it started? It was great. It was fine. But we are also so prone, and this is so apparent to me these days, of thinking that when we get into something, it's supposed to be forever, like a marriage. And with a job, that's not even realistic these days for most of us. It's not going to be, even if you wanted it to. And a lot of times we don't want it to be that way. I mean, I've done what I do here in so many different jobs and businesses. And they expired, and I'm open to that these days. Am I going to podcast for the rest of my life? I don't even expect to. But since I built up to this point, that's what they think. I'm going to be 90 years old croaking it out on the microphone. And that's not realistic, but I like that. So yeah, again, you said it's no longer, it doesn't feel like it did to begin with. And would you say you need to honor that? Would that be a fair statement?
Honor it, be honest with how much of that is you that's changed. And I think we don't know often how much we've changed, how much the job has changed, how much the whole industry has changed.
Yeah.
People are starting to like kind of wake up to industry changes. AI is changing a lot of things pretty quickly, but we're also not super, introspective about the ways in which we've changed, and what used to make us happy no longer does. That maybe this job didn't change as much as we did, or we tend to think we get better over time, that maybe we got better than this job. We're more advanced in this job, but most of the changes human beings make are lateral. We don't get better or worse, we just get different. Preferences change, but not in a bad way or a good way. They just shift. And we're not really trained to think about human growth that way. We're trained to think of improvement or getting worse, not just kind of going from coffee to tea, going from a morning person to an evening person. And I think those are the kind of changes that often lead to us kind of no longer identifying with our careers.
Well, you bring me to thinking, we've had Arthur Brooks on the show a couple times, and his book a couple years ago, Strength to Strength, was significant for me. It called out some things that I was dealing with and looking like I'm not tired of doing what, I've got a lot of drive, but I don't have it in the same way. And he really pulled that out. He says, yeah, you've been, pushing and creating and innovating and doing all this stuff. He says, your brain doesn't really have the same capacity for that, but you've experienced a lot and you do have the capacity to share that wisdom, crystallize knowledge, and do it in a different way. And so, and it just resonated because I realized there's still things that I see that I want to do and impact and change, but I want it to happen. I don't want to be the CEO. So if I'm going to be involved, I'll be on the advisory committee or, be the visionary or whatever, but I'm not going to CEO that thing. I'm kind of done. And he helped me see that. So I changed, even if the job didn't change, I did. And that you're saying, what I hear you saying is, well, and what I believe in is we're supposed to evolve. I mean, so it would make sense that I am not feeling the same way about the job, even if it didn't change. I have, and I hope in some aspects that I should. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, it would be really strange if you're the same person you were as you were in your 30s, right? Yeah. These experiences change what makes you excited. And then all that tacit knowledge that you've accumulated, you want to show it off in new ways, right? You get a little bored with doing the same thing over and over again. When you're a creative person like you are, doing the same thing that used to make you happy just by nature of creativity, and that being the thing that makes you tick, you're going to it's like getting used to the smell of something. The perfume no longer works for you. The food that used to make you excited tastes boring now. And work is the same way. You need something more novel, and novelty is kind of baked into your DNA, what makes you tick. And so just learn and just see that what used to excite you no longer does. You don't get that endorphin release anymore. It's the same thing that we're not trying to think. If you see this a lot in sales, people used to get like a high if they sold a house in real estate. And then, one of my friends who's an agent, she's a broker in New York, she just quit. And she was like, I no longer get the high. I closed a $3 million house. I felt nothing. And that's how I knew it's time for me to change careers, because that used to make me so excited. I was giddy for a week after. And she's like, it doesn't spark joy. So I have to find something new that does. And she's like, I feel like, kind of entitled saying that, but I know I will stop being motivated to sell when I don't get that endorphin feeling. Like it's like down to her like biology of like what makes her excited. And she could tell I'm not motivated to celebrate. She was like, that's my red flag. It's time for me to find something else.
Well, another one that you have on here is taking on too much at work and feeling so overwhelmed that a feeling of helplessness has set in. Again, I relate from a relational standpoint. That was me has been me. I'm trying to recover as a husband and father. And it was part of my identity to do everything. The hero complex. I'm going to fix everything. I'm always available. I'm limitless, no excuses. And I did that until I couldn't. I did that until I got bitter. It was burnout, literally.
Yeah.
And to look at that at work, and has been a struggle for me as well. Delegating is hard. It took me, it really has even been in recent years of hiring somebody in a partnership capacity for me to take over things and do the management that I don't enjoy, and to get things off my plate and get me back into doing the things that I do well, and only that. And it's so difficult for my identity. And it was real. So I have a lot of compassion for that, but I know the overwhelmed, stretched too thin is a big focal point of your book. And you're saying, yeah, it's one of the primary reasons that people leave a job or lose a job, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things going on here. I like that you're tying this to identity, because I do feel like we're in this age of busyness addiction, where if we're not constantly busy, we feel like we're not bringing worth to the workplace. If our schedule isn't packed, if a million people don't want to meet with us, we feel like we are not cool. We don't have status. We aren't visible enough. One of the kind of pieces of data I pulled out in this book from some of the surveys I did is that people are often taking on roles to increase visibility with people in power so they can press the flash, so that the CEO knows their name in an effort to climb up at work and to gain status. But none of the things they're taking on are actually related to their role. It's like committee work or running an employee resource group. So they're liked, but they're not respected for that busyness, And I think that is a really common problem right now. So you're always running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and everyone's like, look at how busy they are. So busy. They don't even have time for dinner, or I forgot to eat today. I'm so busy. It's like a bragging right is a way of showcasing how great you are at your job. But it's rarely actually doing what people are intending for it to do, which is to climb up and gain status.
I relate, Tessa. I mean, I do not want busyness. And so I've done a lot of work to delegate. And so I don't get the interview request, and I don't have people texting and emailing me, and it's worked. And so now I've realized a few times, gosh, it's been like half a day and I've gotten a text from a couple kids. That's kind of it. Am I sure things are going okay? And you go, that's what it's supposed to be. But yeah, it's such a shift. And then you see somebody, it's funny that you see somebody who's just, being pinged every second. And on one hand, my anxiety level's going up, like turn that off. But then you think, oh, they must be it's the cultural ridiculousness. And I'm grateful that I've met a couple men, especially in the past years, who pride themselves in the fact that, no, I'm available right now. You want to talk? Sure. Mm-hmm. And I know that they're incredibly wealthy. They've got a lot of business that's happening. It reminded me of something I heard of Richard Branson eons ago. And he says, yeah, I work about 20 minutes a day. I do a phone call. I make really important decisions. And then the rest of the time is mine. Well, that sounds brilliant, but that means he's hanging out on his island, and sipping a Mai Tai or whatever it is. And that's not what we relate to busyness. And it does feel like you got to realize that, yeah, it's like being the person in Starbucks line or in the coffee shop line who's not on their phone. You're just looking around. You think, dude, that person's a psychopath, apparently.
Yeah.
So we're back to credibility and we're back to identity, right?
Yeah. Identify as a busy person. What's fascinating is high status people at the top are the least busy, and they're the hardest to get. And they actually pride themselves on being, someone who spends 45 minutes at the gym, not on their phone. So like there's this great research on CEOs are not texting when they're on the treadmill. They're like listening to a podcast or listening to music or playing with their kid in the park, and they're actually present. The higher status you climb, the more you say no to, the less busy you actually appear. So it's like people at the top and people at the bottom seem the least busy. People in the middle are like scrambling like a bunch of hamsters on wheels. But we don't realize that the people at the top are like Richard Branson. They're like, no, I just chill all day. It's like, okay, I'm going to strive for that. And I'm going to brag about how not busy I am. So that's become the new flex, is like, I actually am very available. But we have to kind of make that a thing, I think. Otherwise, people are just constantly trying to convince each other that they're just too busy to hang out.
Somebody pointed this out, and I want to say it's somebody that we probably, whose name we would know, and I just can't remember. And they said, if you look back at the billboards, I don't know, 50 years ago, and it would show leisure, That was the symbol of wealth. And somebody's on their yacht smoking a cigarette with a martini and just hanging out in the middle of the day. And they said today that same billboard would be the person in a car with a driver with a laptop in front of them on the phone doing a Zoom call and all these things. That's the status symbol now. And it kind of hit me so hard. They're totally right. And how can we go back and give credit? And I found myself, I want to hold myself up by having leisure time, that I've got margin, which that is just, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're getting better. It's kind of like sleep. People used to brag about, I only get 3 hours of sleep. And now I find more people brag, no, I get 8 hours or more sleep. If we can do that with busyness, we'll probably have done something significant, you think?
Oh, yeah. And I think there is this addiction to constantly be posting on social media, all the stuff that you're up to, all the stuff that you're doing. I mean, launching a book is kind of like the worst form of this torture, because if I'm not busy for a day, I feel like my book must be failing. And people ask me, oh, you must be so swamped. I'm like, I'm actually not. I front loaded a lot. And now I'm just kind of sitting around waiting for my phone to ping. But I'm like you. I'm like, I only got 2 texts today. Does no one want my book? Am I a loser? You know, and I'm trying to untrain my brain to do that and replace those. I have to do other things. If that means like getting a random massage, like I go and get that random massage so that I'm not feeling like a loser because I have nothing to do for 1 hour of the day. And it's just, I've been trained to think this way, and it's bad. People, listeners, don't do this. You don't follow our lead, you know. Take a deep breath and be less busy, and you're going to actually be more productive.
I agree. And back to creativity, like you talked about, I realized that's my time. That's what I want to guard. I want margin. I want 3 or 4 hours in my day that is unaccounted for me to be creative. And I want that, I want my time to be out in nature and exercise and all that. Okay. I want to hit up something that you just hit on right there with the book launch and social media and whatnot. This is actually chapters 4 and 5 in your book. Number 4 is runner up. Number 5, chapter 5, is, or section 5, underappreciated star. So I am more and more aware of, how would I put this? Social media has really, it feels like it is pressuring people who have value to offer. They have wisdom. I mean, you're not out doing the social media thing. You're at a school, you're teaching people, you're doing your thing, you're helping people, and you're not out here, I'm going to say performing. And yet now you've got a book, and what do they want you to do? Go perform, become a performer, go out there. And I'm sure you're getting hit with, okay, Tessa, here's what you got to do to rock it on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook, whatever. And what you're really, and I'm saying me too, what you're really being pushed to do is you've now got to become a performer. You're saying, and I'm thinking, okay, so instead of being over here in my craft, doing my research, applying it to people, being creative, I got to shelf that and come over here and learn how to, I'm going to exaggerate the point and be a jerk and sing and dance.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed. I disappoint myself in that aspect. I'm actually looking for ideas on how to create a place where we can harness people and bring focus to their messages so they don't have to go out and become a performer, and they can stick to their craft. But in the workplace, I know there's a lot of people, and that's what you talk about in your book, who are frustrated. They're doing a good job. They're maybe doing the best job, and they are frustrated because they may have gotten outperformed. I'm going to call it a performance by somebody with not as much skill, but they played the game. Is that relevant? Okay. Tell us about it.
They absolutely, people are getting outperformed, outshined at work.
Yeah.
But I would say that in my experience, slow and steady wins the race. And in social psychology, or in all of science, we talk about what's called shoulder pads research. So research that is trendy, it looks good for 5 minutes, everyone's on board, but you look back at that, you're like, that was a really ugly trend. Like, what were we thinking? We have these embarrassing moments in social science. We have lots of studies that don't replicate. I urge people, especially young people who are like, I need to be a social media influencer to get ahead. Actually, you don't, because most of the work that goes into getting that job, landing that promotion, is slow and steady wins the race, and really knowing who your social comparison others are and having super clear conversations with your boss or manager about what it actually takes to get ahead versus what you think it takes to get ahead.
Okay.
I teach a course on professional development where we spend half the time dispelling Twitter rumors about what you have to do to land a tenure track job. And it's a lot of just BS going around online about how showy you need to be. It's a lot of people thinking that if you show up and press the flesh, you will get the thing. It's taking on visible roles that don't actually showcase your skill. I think the biggest mistake people make is they don't actually know what the failure pipeline looks like for their career. They don't know, among those who are competitive for a job, how many people apply. Okay, how many times does it typically take to get that raise or promotion? I had a colleague who went up for something 4 times before he got it. He's ready to give up. He hated himself. Turns out after he got it, he went on the committee for deciding who gets it next. The average was 8 times. Nobody told him that. And so he was ready to give up. So there's all these like little nuggets like that. We're blaming it on this person was more visible. This person knew the boss's kid. We're going for those salient explanations, but often we don't know the real reason. We don't know who we're really being compared to. We don't know what roles we've missed. There's all these hidden nuggets. And so we're blaming it on sort of like the visible things on social media. And the song and dances matters, but not as much as people think it does. It definitely matters for book promotion to some degree, but I think for most careers, we overemphasize the song and dance, and it's really slow and steady wins the race. Don't fall for trends and have super clear, honest conversations from day one with your boss about what it actually takes to get ahead. And don't assume you know. And don't assume that you know why someone got a raise over you or a promotion over you. Collect that data. And have those uncomfortable conversations about what you're potentially doing wrong. And you have to be willing to kind of, take a slice of humble pie every once in a while as well. And I think that most of us are not kind of used to doing that. It's uncomfortable to find out why we're struggling to get ahead. But we go for these explanations that are very visible that are often actually not the right ones.
Okay, on honest conversations that you just said, Tessa, I mean, at the core of your book, it feels like it's a time for an honest conversation with yourself. And you have, and I listed them out here, you had, 4 stages that people go through. Why am I unhappy? Number 1. Number 2, what do I want my future career to look like? Number 3, fact finding to see if the job is something, is something that's a right fit for me. And number 4, securing the job. But that number 1 right there, I mean, that feels like if somebody's ecstatic with their job, then hopefully this show is very confirming and, kudos, thumbs up to you. If you're not, why are you unhappy is your first line there. Why am I unhappy? And I know some people are going to ask that question and they're just not sure right off the bat. So I feel like we've covered some of this, but I want you to hit it again. Why am I unhappy? Give them some idea joggers to help them get to the root of that. Of course, I'm thinking, because I read your book, it's get to the feelings, but help us out.
Yeah. Get your feelings. I think just asking yourself why you're unhappy, you're not going to know. You need a therapist to help guide you through this, just like we would in any domain of life. And I open each chapter with a bunch of assessment tools that you can take. And these are, 10-item questions to see if maybe some of those triggers are even relevant for you. Are you struggling with your identity? Have you fallen out of love with your job? Those first 2 chapters, identity crisis, drifted apart. Have you fallen out of love with this thing? Or do you feel yourself falling out of love? Torn between places, spread too thin. Are you taking on a million things in an effort to prove yourself at this job? Or are you still in love with this job, but it's not loving you back? And that's what underappreciated star and runner-up are about. Are you struggling to get ahead and you don't know why this thing isn't loving you in the way that you're loving it? And so I think knowing whether you're the person who's drifting apart or the job is drifting apart from you is really key. But the only way to really get to the bottom of that is to kind of follow some of these questionnaires and measure yourself over a few days, weeks, sometimes even months to look for consistency in your answers to really figure out what those triggers are. And the next stage is really digging deep and having conversations with people, honest conversations about what you could potentially be doing wrong, what you're missing, what pieces of information nobody told you, and then exploring those new careers through those one-on-one conversations with people. Nothing replaces one-on-one chats. No website, no LinkedIn learning module, no reading books, nothing sitting on your couch will make up for those one-on-one conversations. They're going to be absolutely enlightening to you about why you might not like something that has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with other people's experiences with that thing. So sometimes talking to the exes of your relationship partner can be enlightening about why you're struggling with a relationship, right? It's not about you. It's like this pattern that this person, this career is having over and over again with others. Oh, it's not just me. Other people are experiencing this too. That shared reality can really help you, but you need these tools. And I really recommend you kind of embrace this kind of self-exploration by using these questionnaires and these tools to kind of help you through this process so you're not just left with these big questions on your own.
Well, shameless promotion of your book. I do appreciate that. I went through, and I'm a physical book guy, and I marked up anyways. And you had sections in there that I went through and checked off the boxes, and then looked at my results to understand myself. So what you're saying here is a part of your book. So I'm going to tell people to do that. On the conversations, is there? Let me make an analogy and have you relate it to the workplace, because I'm going to assume that a lot of people are intimidated or they feel insecure in making those conversations. Because I would, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I'm generally looking at, man, whatever business you're looking at going in or direction, find somebody who's really done well and ask them for advice, ask them out for coffee. And thing we would always push is they think that, somebody who's important, who's successful doesn't have time. And I find, just like we talked about a minute ago, they usually do. And because everybody thinks that, nobody's asking them. So when you say, hey, I'd love to get your advice, most of the people I know are happy to give it. And I still feel bad when people say, Kevin, I'm so sorry to ask. I know you're so busy. And I go, gosh, I'm blessed that you asked. Thank you for doing that. So with that same preface of being intimidated and thinking that somebody's, untouchable or unwilling, do you find that if you're in the workplace and you do ask, people are more willing than you expect?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do this when I wrote this book. I had to reach out to strangers, hiring managers, recruiters, people I didn't know. I was surprised to learn that people almost always said yes if I gave them the specific things I wanted to talk to them about. So, people don't want, can I pick your brain? Please don't use that phrase. They don't want to hear that. They want to see, I have these 3 questions that I want to ask you about yourself. So this isn't about me selling myself to you, me trying to showcase my talent. It's about information seeking. People love to talk about themselves. They just absolutely love to talk about themselves. There's social psychology research showing people will give up money. They'll give up cookies. They'll give up all kinds of things to get to talk about themselves with a stranger. We like doing it. It's fun for us. And it's a pressure-free way of networking. So if you're worried they're not going to like me, how am I going to make a good impression? That's not your job. Your job is just to learn about their experiences and to just ask them about themselves. You don't even need to talk about yourself at all. So if you're shy or nervous about this part of the process, don't worry about it. This isn't about you. This is about them, and asking them to talk about their own experiences, asking them to talk about the things no one else has asked them about, the things that are not on their LinkedIn profile, those hidden little nuggets, things that surprised them at work, things that were more difficult than they anticipated, and give them the questions ahead of time. People don't like surprises. They don't like gotcha moments. This is true in interviews, and this is true in networking conversations. Keep it short and sweet. I think cold emails can work if you frame them the right way. If you give them a point of reference, I found you because we have this and that in common, so they don't feel like they're being spammed. Wait for them to agree before you send them a calendar invite, and then just set up a 15-minute chat and keep it short. And you'll be surprised. I was, and how many people were actually willing to talk to me about their own experiences, and we're happy to do it. We just think everyone's too busy, but really people they miss human connection, I think, is another kind of key piece of that. So harness that, take advantage of that.
Are there any social faux pas in regards to, and I'm literally saying this from an ignorant standpoint, I'm not in the workplace. I haven't had haven't really ever had a real job in the corporate world or whatnot. But I'm thinking, if I'm going after a job, you've got me thinking now, if I was going to look at taking a position, my first thought is contacting the person who had it prior to me or somebody else who held it at one point that I figure you could find out on LinkedIn or whatever. And I'm used to researching people. I mean, I researched you as soon as your name came across. I went and looked at you on social media, looked at people you're connected to, and just did my homework. And I feel fine doing that. is that fully kosher in the workplace in that same way?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can look at past employees. You can look at current employees. One thing that I talk to hiring managers about is rarely do people reach out to them and say, I would like to know more about this position and what I could potentially do to be competitive for it before applying. People just cold apply. They submit their application to a lot of different places. Hiring managers and recruiters are looking for people who are good fits, who will stay in a job. And so you think they're there just to judge you and evaluate you in this kind of higher status role. They're not. They're actually there to find someone who maybe isn't even a good fit for this job, but might be a good fit for another job. And people who are willing to reach out to them and have social skills are like 90% of the way there. Because most of the reason why people who are qualified don't get a job is because they're not particularly socially adept on the interview, or they look weird about feedback. They look defensive about feedback. And that's the number one reason why someone who's close doesn't get a position, is the hiring manager gets a weird vibe that this person's not going to be open to feedback. So just kind of getting over that hump and having that conversation. And if you're socially skilled and you have a good 12-minute chat with a hiring manager for an organization you're thinking of, your name's going to get to the top of the pile. And it took you 12 minutes to get there, instead of 6 months of cold applying and hitting that easy apply button. So it's totally kosher to contact hiring managers, current employees, past employees. Don't just want past people because they might be better, but you want people who are adjacent to the job, not the same role as you, who've been there for a while. All these kinds of people. And it's not to talk about yourself. So don't open with a speech about who you are and why you'd be a great fit. They don't care about that. They're not hiring you today. You just want to hear about them. And I think that's kind of the main thing.
I mean, it feels like an overall message, Tessa, is being aware of your, of your feelings, of where you're at, getting a pulse on yourself, and that there's probably, again, unless things are perfect, if there's anything you want to change, there's gonna need to be some conversations. And some people, and again, I'm an introvert. I'm very conflict averse. So I have compassion for that. And there's a time to say, this is a time to step up and have a little courage. But be prepared, which is what your book does, to take you through so that you're not just going in and saying, hey, yeah, I'm unhappy, I want things to change, but you're specific on that. So your book feels like a guide to get specific, know what you want, and to go in and be confident in that. And you're going to have to pony up and have a talk. Yeah. Fair. Right.
You will need to pony up, but here's the thing. You're in good company. Everyone feels awkward right now. Everyone feels like they're the weirdo in the conversation, that if it's stilted, it's their fault. They're feeling shy. I think that the majority of us assume that everyone else is more comfortable than we are. But I study social awkwardness. That's a complete misconception. And if you say the wrong thing or you feel like maybe you misstep, let it go. The other person is not hanging on to it in the same way that you are. It's okay. You can overcome those moments. You gotta grow that muscle again. And I think the only way to do that is through experience and reaching out and short and sweet conversations. You don't need to tell people your life story. I feel like we feel all this pressure to impress, and no one is looking to be impressed. I'm not looking to be impressed. I don't know if you are, but when I have a conversation, I just want it to be fun. Not like, oh, that person impressed me. I never walk away thinking that for just like a getting acquainted conversation, a networking conversation.
Okay. Well, I love the shows that I know I'm going to go home and talk to my family about. And I literally, probably 20 minutes before we started talking today, Tessa, I got a note from one of my daughters who just got a new position at a place she's really excited about. That's great. Though I'm going to go back to her right now and go, okay, I just had somebody on the show. You need to look at it. If this is a marriage, how do you feel about that? So I'm so excited. So I love the paradigm shift. I will think about that in relation to jobs and work. And I did and I didn't go down that path with us here, but I know I'll find myself thinking about it. It's all as relevant just for entrepreneurs like myself as well, to look at it. I think we have more control over what we're doing as well. But I think that I look at this and the aspects of your book, I can relate most of them to my work as an entrepreneur too, in places where I've been blind to myself. And so to think about this on how would I treat it if I was thinking about it more like a relationship, is just significant. So thank you. That's why you're here. You changed my paradigm. I'm so excited to get the message out, and you will now be the person that I think about in regards to job as relationship. So it's a gift.
Oh, thank you so much. And like, it's a complicated relationship. It goes up and down. That's also normal. You know, you're not going to always love your job. You're going to hate it and love it sometimes at the same time. And that's okay. I think just embracing that complexity is a really important part of the process.
Obviously, I'm going to, we record the intro after. I'll be telling everybody to go to the book. Is there any other place that you would want people to connect with you? Or right now, is it just go find the book as quick as you can?
Find the book. Go to tessawestauthor.com. My quizzes, the quiz that kind of sorts you into your chapters there. It gives you immediate feedback. You can give me your email. I'll give you even more detailed feedback. All of my quizzes can be found online. They're free. I have lots of resources in my Substack as well from the book and so forth. So feel free to check out my website.
Okay. Beauty. Hey, it was just a gift to connect with you. And I look forward to you're going to be my source on this now. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Friends, thanks for joining me on this drive. Again, that is Tessa West. You can find her at tessawestauthor.com. And that new book, again, is Job Therapy, Finding Work That Works for You. That was my muse for this conversation. Got a comment, question, thought, idea for myself, for Tessa? Let me know. Email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.